Yeah, Tom's a good dude. Well, hey man, we're live on Path to Mastery, and it's cool to be here today with Mr. Rich Ace Franklin, the the man himself, man. So hey, thanks for joining me, brother.
Hey, it's a pleasure to be on. I appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely. No, man, I just got done with a coaching call. I haven't changed, so I got my little jacket on, and actually I dressed up for you. What am I talking about?
This is the same thing I wore to the gym today. I went to the gym and I trashed my legs. So I've been sitting in this chair doing some meetings and everything since the gym, and I'm content not moving.
Good stuff, brother. Well, I appreciate having you. And we're doing a podcast. We're streaming right now on Clubhouse. We're on LinkedIn and also YouTube. And so I'm with Mr. Rich Franklin, 3-time champion, middleweight, UFC.
Mm.
I was telling you when we spoke last week, man. Like I just remember watching your fights when I got back into the UFC. I was like, man, this guy's a friggin' beast. I
Well,
loved it. And it's wild that I'm here talking to you today. I was telling my wife this early. She's like, no shit.
yeah, I'll tell you what. That era of MMA was just there's such a great era as it started to develop, like change from the actual individual martial arts to what truly became mixed martial arts. Like we were kind of that first wave of people that was really putting things together, and it was just an era where there was just a lot of solid guys that came out of that era. I mean, guys like Randy Couture or Tito Ortiz, Matt Hughes, myself, Chuck Liddell, like just these big names that pretty much like
Yeah.
carried the torch of MMA and preaching the gospel of MMA. Not only here in the U.S., like getting the sanctioning and everything that needed to be done, but they used me to open up a lot of markets like internationally as well. I fought in a lot of foreign markets for the organization, so it was a good era of mixed martial arts in my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah. It was awesome. I think I told you when I was much younger, I watched it, I know it was different. It was like, I think anything went maybe before Dana owned it. There was Tank Abbott and there was Hoist Gracie and just, it was all kinds of chaos going on. It was still interesting. I mean,
Yeah,
it was
before before
entertaining.
before Zuffa purchased it, it was owned by, I think, SEG was the company, and then originally, I mean, this was pitted. When you look at the first UFC, it was pitted of martial art versus a martial art, right? I mean, that's kind of what the entire idea was: is you're going to do like jujitsu versus boxing, or wrestling versus karate, or whatever it was. And at that time, it's weird because there's this whole ideology, like when you look at like the concepts of Bruce Lee and his teachings was like martial arts, you shouldn't limit yourself to one way. It was about utilizing what was useful and getting rid of the stuff that was not. And that can be individualistic for each person. I mean, there are certain things from a martial art that I would find useful for anything from my style of athleticism to my body type versus someone else. And so we just kind of pick and choose these things. So even though the idea or the concept of taking across martial arts what you could find useful in real combative application wasn't a new concept. That was such a new concept back in the early to mid 90s at that time.
Yeah, it seems like it's like if you look at the fighters now as opposed to the fighters back, certainly way back, but even in your era, I guess the fighters seem a lot. The top guys seem like they're more versed in all. Is that true? Are they more versed in like all the different arts, or you don't see as many one-dimensional fighters? I guess that's what I'm trying to get at. Is that
Today,
yeah?
no, I mean, I don't think you do see as many one-dimensional fighters, but I think in the game of mixed martial arts, I mean, as in life, or with anything that you do, you're only as strong as your weakest chain link, right? I mean, like
Mm.
that's just how things go. If you have a chain on a bicycle, or anything else for that matter, or if that chain is going to break, it's going to break at its weakest link. So that application in MMA is such that there was a point in time where, for example, myself, like I had created a name for myself regionally within the Midwest. I was starting to beat names where people were like turning like, oh, who's this guy over here? And so at that point in my career, I was really weak, for example, in wrestling. Like it was the weakest link in my chain. And so I had to spend a lot of time basically like kind of sucking up my pride, going into wrestling rooms, forgetting the fact that I knew how to strike or do any of that other stuff, and just wrestle with guys. And I was getting like mopped up on the mat every single day. And this was like a tough pill to swallow, but that's what I needed to do to make myself whole. And so I don't really see, there was this period of one dimensional athletes in mixed martial arts at the time, but I would say during my generation, what you saw is like you saw a time where, for example, like Brazilian Jiu Jitsu was king of the world. And then there was a time where wrestlers figured out how to beat the BJJ guys, and then wrestling kind of ruled the roost. And then there was a time where good stand up guys like myself figured out how to stuff the takedown. And then it was like, well, if you can't take me down, you're going to end up getting knocked out. And so it kind of came in waves. But I would say within my career, you truly hit this stride of MMA where you had to be good at every single martial art. And I think that one of the things that many athletes lack today is that I'm just a fan of training in each of the individual martial arts. Like I had specific days where I trained and I mixed everything together in a mixed martial arts fashion, but I had days where I worked my pure boxing. I had days where I worked purely my jujitsu. I had days where I worked purely just wrestling. And I think that's what made me effective across the board, because I spent time in each of these individual arts so that I wasn't just a one-dimensional athlete.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I always thought of you as a striker. I mean, you used to knock people's heads off. You know, that's the interesting thing too about you. You're like such a chill, calm guy. I never saw you get riled up at the weigh-ins or anything or talk a lot of shit. But then when you stepped in the ring, like were you able, did you have like another level that you like turn it on? Like,
No, it's just listen. I think anybody that's chill, when you do that thing in life with them that they are passionate about, there's go time and there's not go time, right? And so, yeah, my boxing coach used to always tell me, "Don't fight the fight before the fight." One of my favorite sayings, because for example, the first time I ever went skydiving, I can remember riding that plane ride. And for 15 minutes, I tortured myself. Like, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? Even though I'm not really afraid of heights, like that first time, you're like, but why am I jumping out of a perfectly good plane? And for 15 minutes, I tortured myself. For what? Like, what? Nothing changed. I was still going to jump out of that plane. So it's like I cannot suffer for 15 minutes and jump out of the plane, and maybe I suffer while I'm jumping, or I can suffer for 15 minutes and jump out of that plane, and maybe I suffer while I'm jumping still. But suffering for that 15 minutes prior to it doesn't change anything, right? And so I am a pretty chill person, but if like people that know me that are in my inner circle would describe me as someone who's intense. I'm very intense. So for example, if you went to the gym today with me and you wanted to do legs, I'm not there to mess around. And if you're working out with me, you're not there to mess around. And if you think that you're there to mess around and it interferes with my workout, you and I are going to have issues really, really quickly, right? And so it's like, I'm nice until I'm not.
yeah, I get it. Well, and you fought at 185. Right? 185. Right?
Yeah.
What do you walk around at?
Well, now in retirement, I walk around at about 220.
Oh, wow.
I would say that my peak weight at 185 was probably like around 208, 210, like 210, sub 210. I kept it there. When I went after I decided to bounce around at the end of my career, I started fighting at light heavyweight again. Now I'm not a light heavyweight fighter. I'm just not big enough for that weight class. You can look at like my fight with Forrest Griffin, and there's a tremendous size difference between the two of us. I think the most I got up to when I was fighting at light heavyweight was about 212. So I'm about 8 to 10 pounds heavier than I was at my heaviest when I was competing, which I could tell a big difference. I could tell when I go into the gym and grapple or when I spar. I'm carrying a little bit more muscle now. A lot, like my physique looks different because I'm not training 25 hours a week. So it requires a different amount of blood and oxygen to fuel the muscles. And so you strategically have to approach how you're going to pace yourself grappling or whatever it is that you're doing in the gym. Like you make adjustments to these things, but yeah, so I walk around about 220 now.
So did you always know you wanted to be a fighter, or excuse me, did you always know you wanted to be a fighter? Or you were a school teacher, right? I mean,
I was.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, look, growing up, I always used to tell people like, when I was a kid growing up, people say, well, what do you want to do when you grow up? And I said, well, I either want to be a superhero or a professional athlete. And I was kind of fresh out of superpowers is what I always jokingly tell people. So I chose the latter. But by the time I got into high school, like I wasn't this, I wasn't this prodigy athlete. You know, I didn't even start from a high school football team. And so I got into martial arts just as something to do when high school athletics ended. My father put me in karate when I was a young kid.
Mm.
So I got back into this just as a hobby. And I thought, like, well, this keeps me active. And in case I ever have to defend myself on the street, I'm kind of, learning two skills at once, kill two birds with one stone, so to speak. And so I got into martial arts. Then I was, I had gone to college, majored in education, mathematics, ended up becoming a math teacher. But the whole time I was in college, like, this was just a hobby that I really truly enjoyed doing. And, I have a very, I used the word intense before, but I have a very, I just really engross myself into something that I'm passionate about to a level that's beyond what most people would do, which is what I did with martial arts. And at the end of the day, I've been training all through college. So I took my first amateur match just for fun. It's like, all right, well, I've been doing this. Let's see, can you really put your money where your mouth is, type of thing. And I happened to be good at it. And just one led to another, led to another, led to another. And I just enjoyed doing it. I got bit by the bug, as they say. And so I kept going. And by like my fourth year of teaching, I thought, I wonder if I could do this full time. And so I had picked up a manager. My manager was Monty Cox, who's managed half a dozen other UFC champs. And he's like, yeah, I think you could do this, but there's no such thing as a part-time champ. Like, you need to dedicate yourself full time. So I was like, well, this will be my last year teaching, and I'll give it a shot. I don't even know if at that time I really thought like it would turn into a 10-year career for the UFC, but it ended up doing such, and the rest is history.
Yeah. And how many times did you defend your belt?
Defended it twice.
Okay. Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good stuff, man. Well, listen, I mean, just to get to that level, and like I said, I don't know if it was just the timing for me, like when I started watching it again. I think it probably became mainstream around the show, right? It's kind of what brought it
Yeah.
back. I remember, like I said, I think I said this last week. I remember we went to a party. It was just a house party, and they had on UFC. I hadn't seen it in years, and it was the fight with what's his face, George St. Pierre against Matt Hughes.
Oh,
And Matt Hughes had submitted him, and
yeah.
that was a cool fight. I was like, holy cow, look at those guys.
Yeah.
That was awesome. And then that's when I think I became aware of you, right? That was right around that time, right? That was
Yeah.
when you
Matt,
were
Matt,
coming up.
Matt had won his title prior to me. We had both done a lot of work together because I used to travel from Cincinnati up to the Militich camp in Iowa, which was the premier school at the time. And I mean, they were definitely like a school of hard knocks. And I got a lot of training up there. Used to do a lot of work with Matt Hughes, with Tim Sylvia, with Jens Pulver. Jeremy Horn was instrumental in my development. Like, he really took an interest in me and helped me quite a bit. He was so far ahead of the curve with jiu-jitsu at that time. Like, he was just on a completely different level. I got tremendous amounts of knowledge and without those guys and Pat himself. I remember the first time I sparred with Pat Militich. Oh man, that guy. I come up there and I mean I'm like this, like, I think I'm like this young stud, and man, he just started putting it on me and hit me with so many body shots that I just was like wrapping my arms around my waist, like, dude, just hit me in the face, man. Like, I don't want to be hitting the body anymore. It was brutal my first trip up there. Yeah, man, a lot of good guys. Robbie Lawler in that gym. Tony Fricklin was in that gym. Like, a lot of guys that I got a lot of good.
Robbie Lawler, he'd been around for a while, and then he just kind of at the end he really found his stride.
Yeah,
Right. Like
yeah. I mean, when I first started working with Robbie, he was like 19 at the time, and you want to talk about, I mean, there's a guy that was just like just tons of athletic talent. He hits like a hammer. It's another southpaw, and Robbie actually helped me get ready for a couple other camps. When I was facing other southpaws as well. So just a lot of good guys that came out of the camp, a lot of good connections that I had, and owe a tremendous amount of thanks to a lot of people from that area.
So what do you think? Like, and then and I've got some friends here too on Clubhouse. I'm gonna let them ask you a question or so if you're open to it.
Yeah.
Like, what's the difference between like if you think of, like, I'll use Robbie Lawler as an example because I don't know him personally, but I mean, he was in the league for a long time, never really got up to that level, right? Or another example would be what's his face, Cowboy Cerrone. Like
Mhm.
he had so many title fights, he would get all the way up there and then lose the big fight.
I mean,
Like what's the difference like to get to that? Like how do you get to where you were when you win the big fights?
look, I tell you this, man. When being as a kid, I grew up dreaming of being an athlete. My favorite athlete growing up was Barry Sanders, running back for the Detroit Lions. If the listeners don't know who he is, look up his highlight reels. One of the most amazing running backs to ever touch a football. And I can remember playing backyard football and even football when I was a kid. And the moment that I would get the ball, like in my head, I was picturing myself as being Barry, being able to move and cut like he could, which in my head I could, but in reality, it's like not even close. But you see these athletes, you see the Michael Jordans, you see the Tom Brady's, you see the Peyton Mannings of the sport, like the people who make it really, really big. And that is like you think like, oh man, I want to shoot for this. Like this is what I want to be when I grow up. It's like for every Tom Brady there is in the league, I mean, think about the hundreds of quarterbacks that are in and out within a year. They just wash out, right? Because you got these young studs that are coming out of college every year, but there's only 32 teams in the NFL. There's only 32 spots, and you got starters, of course. If you're the 49ers, you just buzz through like your first five on the list recently because they were all the way down to like the number 5th spot on their QBs because everybody keep getting hurt. But point being is that there's not a whole lot of spots. And the reality is that when you dream of being a professional athlete, like it's like a lot of things can happen that can derail you. When my entire career, like coming up, I always say this, like there's no other way for me to explain my success than the good Lord himself stepped in and said, I got a path for you and you just need to stay on this path. And I'm not joking when I say that, because I didn't start from a high school football team. And it's like something as simple as like, maybe I'm preparing for a match, and this match that I'm about to take is a key opponent that I need to bring me into a different stratosphere that's going to get me recognized. But I don't know, on the way to the gym one day, I twist my ankle and I'm like, oh no, I'm going to have to pull out of this fight. Like I'll take this fight 3 months from now. Well, little did I know that there was going to be a scout or the matchmaker from a major organization that was going to see that fight that I would have impressed that day. But now I've missed that opportunity. And just this one little, twist of an ankle derailed my entire career, and I never, ever, ever got to make it. Right. And it's like, there are so many variables that can impact your success or not. It's like, man, bro, the stars align for me. And then, on top of that, it's like, I mean, I get it. I have to go in the gym. I got it every day. I have to come in. I have to grind. It's like, the Lord might open a path for me, but at the end of the day, he's going to be like, look, you uphold your end of the bargain and I'll uphold my end of the bargain. And I still have to go in and do that grind and everything. And what that comes down to is consistency. Like you got to consistently show up. And I'm not saying in no way, shape, or form do I want to misconstrue like, somebody like a Robbie that you're talking about or Cerrone didn't consistently show up. But it's like that consistency of being able to perform fight after fight after fight after fight because it's not about being, this is what I learned about the fight game. It's not about being the best fighter in the world. I don't have to be the best fighter in the world to be a very successful fighter. I just have to be better than one guy on one given night. That's it. That's all I got to do. And I got to consistently be able to do that over and over against some of the best in the world. And if I can consistently do that over and over, then I will become the best in the world. But it's like, I don't have to worry about beating everybody. I just got to worry about beating this guy,
One guy
on this night.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. The one guy in front of you.
Yeah.
Well, I do find it interesting though. I mean, I think like, what is that thing, that difference maker, and I hate to use Cerrone because I've been a fan. I'm still a fan, I mean, I wish he would have won a title at some point, but I mean, he made it all the way up to that. Like he would dominate and then lose the big fight, like dominate his whole way up and then lose the big fight.
It's amazing. Like, and I'll just say this on the flip side of that. Like after I lost my title, I lost my title. I had a second shot at regaining the title, never regained it. I spent the rest of my career in either the main or co-main event of all the fights that I fought. And, once you lose that title, people start looking at you like, well, when are you going to retire? It's like, man, in no other sport do people think of athletes this way. If you won a Super Bowl your third year as a quarterback in the league and you continued playing as a quarterback in the NFL, like even if you're making it to the playoffs, people don't think like, oh, well, you should just retire because you can never get to a Super Bowl championship again. It's like, no, I mean, I'm still putting on good fights against top level guys. Like, man, I've seen guys like Cerrone and Lawler. Like, you want to talk about wars? And on top of that, like I've been in the cage with a guy like Robbie on a frequent basis, and I know what he's capable of. It's like, so it's just like, it's a matter of that night just didn't end up working out for
He
him. And
broke it though. He was able to break through though
yeah,
and start winning,
yeah,
which was interesting, right? Because a lot
yeah.
of guys aren't able to do that. What do you think that was?
I mean, look, man. I mean, going back to the statement I made before about variables, it could be anything. Take a guy like, you take a guy like Cerrone that you're talking about. I mean, I don't know. Maybe he got in a big fight with his wife the night before a match, and that mentally threw him off. Who knows? Maybe his kid got sick with the flu really bad midway through his camp, and he had to take a week and a half off. Like, there's so many things that. That's why when you're people are like, who do you think's going to win this match? I'm like, I don't know. I'd love to have about a 5-minute conversation with each guy and see how life was for them over the last 10 weeks of their camp. And then I'll let you know, because there's so many external factors that can really affect that kind of stuff. So who knows, when you talk about a guy like Cerrone, like maybe he had a lot of business stuff going on. I know, he's a very blue collar, hands-on kind of guy. Like, he really is a cowboy. So maybe he's doing a lot of work outside. Like, maybe he's wearing himself down in his training, or maybe things are happening where he's got too many problems to solve. You never know.
Yeah, no doubt. What do you think about the fight this weekend, man? Coming up next week.
Don't even know.
Don't even know.
Yeah, don't even know. I'll tell you what I'm focused on is I got 2 things I'm focused on right now. Number one championship's coming to the US in
May 5th, my birthday.
Yeah. And well, happy
yeah,
birthday.
Thank you. Where you guys going?
Denver. We're going to Denver.
Okay, I love that.
And so I got a trip there next week. And then the other thing is that I'm prepping my commentary work for our February 25th match with Lineker, John Lineker versus Andrade for the title rematch again, because the first match between the two of them, Andrade had that fight all but won. I mean, he had it closed out and then accidentally kneed Lineker in the groin, and that was game over. The fight ended on a foul, so it's a vacant title now, and that's something that they got to settle the score on. So I'm working on those 2 things. I haven't even had time to look at the fights this weekend yet.
There's this kid, the kid from what's it called? The kid from Russia. Can't think of his name right now. Islam. You know what I'm talking about? Yeah. Kid's no joke. I mean, he looks legit. So should be a good fight. I don't order them all anymore, but I make.
Are you going to be watching?
I think I'm going to get that one. I don't get them all, but I think I'm going to get that one. That one intrigues me.
So that's a difference between this era and my era. Like, in my era, everybody got all of them.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, they weren't every month either, though.
Well, they weren't like it's like every other week now.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I think there's it's almost every week. Maybe there's one week, but most of them, a lot of them are free. Well, let me ask you this: you mentioned football a couple times, and Brady. Like, you're a fan of football?
I mean, okay, yeah, I am. I grew up playing football. I mean, I played that sport from the time I was 8 years old to the time I graduated high school. And I wasn't smart enough to realize that I'm not an athlete that's built for that sport. Like, I don't have that 6 to 8 second explosiveness. I'm a mid-range athlete. If I was a track runner, my event would probably be like the 800 or something. Like, I can hit like that, like 75% sprint and just grind through things, which is indicative of my fight style. But no, I did grow up watching football, huge fan. And now I'm a casual fan. I catch games, my Bengals here in Cincinnati, they were in the Super Bowl last year. We were looking good this year. Tough loss for us against KC. And so I'm a home team guy, but yeah, I mean, you have to be a fan or at least respect the work of someone like Brady for sure.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's why I brought it up, just because you said, well, he said he's going to retire. I don't know. He did say he's retiring this year. He's going to take a job as a commentator, but who knows? I can't see him retiring, man.
Listen. That's one guy. That's one guy who has longevity in the sport because he's so in tune with, for example, like his nutrition, and not just that, but his lifestyle. Like, I mean, Brady's not a guy who I would assume is going out and partying after games. He's like, I got to get home and get my sleep. I would imagine he does a crap ton of film study. Like, people often think that athletes is like, oh, I'm gonna go into the gym, I'm gonna train my butt off, I'm gonna work. It's like, man, there's so much more to the game than that. It's like, are you not drinking the alcohol when all your teammates are? Are you skipping the party nights out when all your teammates aren't? Are you getting that eight plus hours of rest every night for recovery from, are you getting those massages on Sundays, which sounds great until they're digging into the muscle so much that you're in pain, gritting it out every Sunday? Like, are you doing the cold plunges? Are you doing the hours and hours and hours of film study, breaking down your opponents or your team, whoever it's going to be? Like, those are the things that are like, because everybody can go in the gym and just, train real hard and get punched in the face and punch other people in the face more often. But like, it's all that other stuff where you need the discipline.
Amen to that, brother. I do want to talk about the Anderson Silva fight in a minute, but I'm gonna see if any of us, any of my friends here on Clubhouse, anybody want to ask Rich Franklin? Shantae's with me. She's always. Are you familiar with Clubhouse, Rich?
No,
Actually,
I'm not.
No, it's an audio app. It's pretty wild, actually.
It's a what?
It's an audio only
audio app. Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. I met some really cool people on there. Grant Cardone and
Dave, you're too good looking to be on an audio only app, buddy.
Thank you, bro. I appreciate you saying that, man. I do. And my wife's the only other person that tells me that. So now thank you.
Yeah, well, your wife and your mom. Like, if your mom didn't tell you that, then you get a terrible mom, man. If she didn't tell you that.
My mom's always telling me. So Shantae's here with us, though. What's up, Shantae? How are you?
Hey, I'm good. So I have a couple of questions.
I don't know if it's my volume or your volume sounds really low. Do you hear that, Steve?
Can you hear me?
I can hear her, but barely hear her.
It's low. Hold on. Let me see if I can turn it up.
I didn't know if I was supposed to hear her or not, or if everybody else.
Yeah, you should.
I can go back out and come back in.
Well, Shantae, I can hear you, so go ahead. I'll lean in and intently listen.
Okay, awesome. So it's an honor to talk to you because I watch UFC all the time. But I have two out of my 5 children who are in wrestling.
Mm-hmm.
And my daughter is 16. She's in her junior year. This is her 5th year of wrestling. And my son is 13. He wrestles in the heavyweights. He's in 7th grade. He is 5'10", 200 pounds, and he's actually gone undefeated. So he's 10-0.
He's 5'10", 5'10", 210, and he's only 13.
Yeah.
Lord of mercy, what do you feed the child?
He eats everything.
Clearly.
I don't know. Clearly. Yeah, he eats like all the time, and but he loves to be outside. He played football. This is for his first year playing football. And he's played basketball. He just loves sports in general.
Mm-hmm.
And his sister was really egging him on to do wrestling so that he could kind of continue the little legacy that she has started. And so I have 3 questions. I asked them if they could ask you a question, what it would be. And so one of the questions was, how do you not let them get in your head? Like my daughter has an opponent on her team, another girl who is constantly telling her that she's not good enough, that, she sucks. And my daughter actually has pretty good technique. She needs to work on her muscle strength, but she's actually not that bad. And, she doesn't like it when the girl tells her that kind of stuff, but she's like, no, it's all right, Mom. I'll just shake it off. But what techniques could she do to avoid letting that stuff get into her head?
Well, first of all, she could. My favorite technique would be a suplex, and she could just pick that chick up and dump her on her head.
I knew you were going to say
that junk. No, I mean, listen. First of all, this is going to stem back, and some of this stuff is like cliche motivational talk stuff. But this comes down to a person's belief in themselves, right? Because if you don't believe in yourself, who is going to believe in you? And you hear these kinds of things all the time. So that's the first thing I'd say. But when I was prepping for matches, what ends up happening is you have things that are in your circle of control, right? So there are things that I can control and there are things that I can't control. And when I was getting ready for a match, oftentimes I would start thinking about an opponent and be like, man, like, what if my opponent is faster than me? Or what if he's stronger than me? Or what if? And you start doing all these what ifs. And it's like, okay, well, if my opponent is stronger than me, can I really do anything about that? I mean, I got 8-10 weeks to get ready for this fight. Like, can I actually make myself stronger than him? Probably not. So, but what can I do? Well, I can develop a game plan that is going to negate the possible strength advantage that he has. And so it's like I got to focus on the things that are in my circle of control, and not worry about the things that are out of my circle of control. So it's like literally like your daughter should do an exercise where if somebody says something like, well, you suck, it's like, well, okay, do you suck? I mean, because do you actually believe in yourself? Well, no, I don't suck. Okay, well, then we have a good foundation to build on here. What are your deficiencies? It's like, well, let's improve on those things. And you know, maybe this girl is just a hater, but at the end of the day, when she starts questioning her abilities, it's like, well, what do you have? Like, what is in your circle of control? What isn't in your circle of control? And whatever is in your circle of control, alter it. So if she needs to work on her strength, get yourself a good strength and conditioning coach, and work on the specific areas that are in your that she needs work on. You know, today, for example, I've had a couple knee injuries, and I can tell, like in the gait of my run, for example, that it's changed. And so I was working with a strength and conditioning coach today, and he says, "Look, we're going to do extra strength work for your hip, so that because like your body's compensating. We need to rebuild, make sure that we're building that hip in your erector." So I was specifically working these exercises that were strengthening the deficiencies that I had today, albeit small deficiencies, but little things that, down the road can become bigger deals. Either way, it's like, this is something that I have control over, that I can alter in my life. So it's like she needs to focus on those things that she can't control, and not even worry about that other stuff. And you know, on the flip side of that, there's a whole hater and naysayer speech that I can give you as well. And this girl might just fall into one of those two categories.
Yeah, she's definitely a hater.
Well, here's my
But
answer to that. Jesus only had 12 friends. He was perfect, and one of them was a hater, just FYI. So you can't please
Yeah, no,
everybody.
my daughter is resilient, and she's like, it's okay, mom. She's like, she's just deflecting some of her insecurities on me. It's all right.
Smart. She sounds like a smart girl.
Hey, and
She is
Shantae,
phenomenal.
and Grant says if you don't have any haters, you're not getting enough attention. So
There you go.
Exactly. So, my other question is, my son wanted to know, how do you persevere through the difficulties, like the injuries and stuff like that. He wants to know how, what you do to keep going. Like, even when you get hurt, you keep going. What do you do?
Well, I mean, okay, so look, I grew up in the 80s, and that was the rub some dirt on it and get back in the game mentality, which I is, in my opinion, at this age, a double-edged sword, because that created this mental toughness that you have to be able to just push past things. But when it comes to injuries and things of that nature, I'll just tell you this, man. At some point in time, you will like your sins will they will be made known. So like, if you have like injuries and you try to grind through these injuries and you don't properly rehab and take care of yourself, later on down the road, that ankle you twisted suddenly when you're 30 years old and it's giving you problems, that can become an issue. So it's like, first of all, anytime that you have injuries, like, make sure you take care of that stuff, rehabilitate properly. Like, recovery in every manner is key to athletics. And I mean, if you're going to go through like a hard workout, the moment that I went into the gym today and I did legs, the moment that I stepped off the floor, I immediately grabbed a shake, and that shake was loaded with some sugars and carbohydrates to already help my body start rebuilding. And from there, it's like, well, am I going to get a massage? Am I going to, whatever other therapies that I need to do? Rest is huge. So like tonight, I shouldn't have any trouble sleeping, because when I'm resting, my body is repairing itself, particularly from like an endocrine level, because all the hormones in my body, things like testosterone and insulin and growth hormone and cortisol levels are suppressed. And so all these kinds of things are important. Young kids don't understand this kind of stuff, because I always jokingly say, like, a kid can like break a bone and just like shake it out and be like, okay, it's fixed. But you don't heal that way when you get older. And the older you get, the more keen you have to be on things like warming up properly, on cooling down properly, and on rehab and recovery properly. And that's everything from the foods you eat, to the fluids you drink, to the hours you sleep, to the, whatever it is that you do. So it's like, if you want to be successful, and this is what I always tell people, like, it's like, if your kids are sitting in the wrestling room and they're looking around the room at the people to their left and the people to their right, and you ask yourself, what makes you different than the person next to you? I'll look at the person like, what makes me different? Like, I trained hard today. Well, so did he. So did she. So what makes you different, kid? Like, what makes you different? Because it's like, well, and this is what I was just talking to David about before I was answering your questions. It's like, are you going to bed when all the other kids are staying up playing, like, screwing around on TikTok or playing video games or whatever? Are you watching film when other kids are sitting there watching Netflix? Are you studying the game? Are you, and it's all those other things that you have to do. And it's like, so when it comes to the recovery stuff, like, your kids can go in and they can train and they can work their techniques, and we could get into like training methodology and all that as well, which is a whole different story. But at the end of the day, like, they have to be just as dedicated to their recovery as they are the training.
So Rich, I know
Absolutely.
we
Can I ask one more question really quick, David?
1 second, Shante. I know we had planned 45 minutes. Are you good with another?
Yeah, I got some extra.
Okay.
Minutes. Go ahead. I'm not going to cut Shante. She said she had 3 questions.
No,
I'm not going to be like, no, sorry.
I want to respect the time.
Killing this lady's dreams of her child. These are her children's questions. It's like, no, I don't have time for your kids. Like,
hey,
who is that guy?
Brother,
I can't be that guy.
I have to ask as the.
You know what? I appreciate.
My bad.
I appreciate your consideration.
I'm the bad guy here, Sean.
I'm going to apologize for David right now because it's so rudely just going to interrupt the third question here. But I do appreciate his consideration of my time. Anyway, go ahead, Shante.
I do too.
Sometimes you have hard stop guests. That's all.
Yeah.
My children are my heroes. So anytime I'm like, hey, I'm going to be listening to this podcast. Is there a question you want to ask? So that's why I have these questions. But the third question was, they both wanted to know, is there like a pain cream or a muscle relaxer, anything that you would recommend that you use, when they get done with their matches, and that would help them in that recovery process? And I'm done.
Okay. Well, let me answer your question with a question, and then you got to give me some more information. When they're done with their matches, what kind of pains are we talking about here?
So, my daughter just broke her pinky. One of the girls, she flipped one of the girls, and the girl somehow landed on her pinky wrong, and so she broke it. So she was out of wrestling for 2 weeks. But she wrestled with it wrapped, and when she was done, of course, she had the aching that went all the way up to her arm. And my son, I don't know what he did, but he picked up a kid that was just like a huge kid, and he hurt his toe. And I've been having them both wrap it and just kind of put like arnica on it and whatever. But they were curious if there was something better they could do.
No, it's funny that you mentioned arnica, because I'm a big holistic guy when it comes to that kind of stuff. I limit the amount of like pain creams, pharmaceuticals that I take, all that kind of stuff. Like, I limit this stuff tremendously. So I'm more into, listen, you can look at like some of the data on things like ice. Like, ice has just as much anti-inflammatory ability as ibuprofen, for that matter. So icing something after a match, I always jokingly tell people these stories where they're like, it's like, you think the life of an athlete is like, when you get out of the, like for me, when you get out of the cage and you're like going out and partying at the club or whatever later that night. And I did this motivational talk one time where I have like one of my feet in an ice bucket because my ankle is trashed, and both of my hands in an ice bucket. And then I had like these like ice stuff on my face in the locker room because I'm working on like all this damage from getting punched on. And so like immediately the moment I went into the locker room, like I'm icing the things that need to be iced. If you have soft tissue damages, like you pull a muscle or something like that, you're going to look for like heat instead. But it's like, I turn towards therapies of either ice therapies. So for example, like I have a cooler with a sleeve on it. So if ever I injure something and I need to ice, then I have this like cooler that has the sleeve that runs like the cold water through it nonstop. But on the flip side, like heating pads, electric stimulation units, things of that nature, where, I had a buddy of mine that was working out the other day, and he tweaked his hamstring, and we came like come home, and I'm like, dude, I said, get on the heat and throw the electric stim on there right away, just to run some, so that it creates like blood flow. And because that blood's going to flow back in and just help with the injury. And so we did exactly that. And then oddly enough, like one of the guys that we're training with at the gym, we come in today, and he said, get on the hamstring curl and give me like sets of 100. And so he had like these really light reps of 100, utilizing the hamstring, getting it moving so that all this blood was flowing through there. Cause it's that blood that's going to remove all like the toxins from the injury. So, for me, it's like, can these pain creams help? Like if you put something like a Bengay on your back, or, a Tiger Balm or something like that, like it's going to create heat. And what does that heat create? It creates blood flow, like essentially, and it's the blood that brings the nutrients in, and that's how you're overcoming things. So yeah, I mean, I would look into like you can pick up, for example, like a stim unit on Amazon or something like that for, you can get one for, I don't know, $20. Like they're not crazy expensive, and you can use those things consistently with heat or ice or whatever you need, and just bringing that blood back in really helps with recovery. You have to be smart about your downtime, relaxing, and making sure you actually give whatever is injured the proper time to recover.
Awesome.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
You're welcome, welcome, welcome. Those are really good questions coming from some kids. That's awesome.
Yeah, right.
I have professional athletes that don't even ask me things that complex.
I better watch out too. I didn't know Shantae had those kids like that. Come over and slam me. Shantae, I learned something new about you today. All right. So I had another question, but well, you know what? I got two more quick ones. One's like an insignificant. Well, actually, you know what? I'll ask you this one first. With regards to similar to what Shantae asked about how do you recover from something, your loss to what's his face, Anderson Silva, like to me, that was just like, holy cow. Like that was like, holy shit.
First time or second time?
The first time. Second time. I honestly don't even remember the second time.
Yeah.
Just the first time was like a shock. I mean,
Yeah.
did you experience it like that too? And
for sure. How
do you get over that?
If you've listened to my TED Talk, I did a TED Talk titled "How to Be a Loser," which is just a funny play on words, and it's basically like how do you deal with loss, how do you move forward, that kind of stuff, and it's about having the tools in your toolbox to do that. Some life experiences had shaped that talk, like my loss to Anderson Silva was one of them. My father's death was another, and so it's like, I could do a whole breakdown on this, but I mean, essentially, like when you suffer some sort of loss in life, setback, failure, whatever it may be, whether you're working in the corporate world, or you're an athlete, or you've gone through a divorce, or anything of that nature, it's like you have to be able to step back. Like, first of all, emotion always trumps logic. This is just a true statement. This is why doctors don't operate on their own children, or detectives don't try to solve their own wives' murders or something like that. Like, so, you have to be able to step back and try to strip yourself from emotion. This can take time. The sooner that you're capable of stripping at least a tremendous amount of level of emotion out of a situation and actually logically look at something, the better off you are. That took me some time with my loss when I lost my title, but being able to step back and look and now assess this thing from a logical perspective and say, okay, where did I go wrong? And I need to figure out how to correct these things, because what ends up happening when you experience some sort of failure in life is it can create these they're like mental shackles, like shackles that are just shackled around your ankles that are just slowing you down. Like you're trying to walk through life and you can't because it's moving you so slow. And you have to say to yourself, like, okay, let me look at this information. What can I gain from this? So in my instance, I'm going to study the film. I'm going to watch my performance. I'm going to think about how I set up my camp, what I did wrong, my strategies, and I'm going to take what I can, utilize that with it. Going back to just to use the previous phrase that I answered with Shantae, your circle of control. What was actually in my circle of control? Okay, let me change that stuff. And then all the rest of this stuff that's not in my circle of control, I need to like have what I call situational amnesia. Forget it even existed, because otherwise I can't change it. It's not in my circle of control, and I need to let it go. So like being able to evaluate what is and what is not in your circle of control and move forward. Maybe you're getting a no at a sales job or something like that, whatever it may be. It's like we all experience setbacks or failures in our own way, and being able to just step back and really look at that. And you have to be able to remove emotion from it. And the problem is that oftentimes when you're going through these types of situations, it doesn't matter what these things may be, you don't realize that these things are emotionally affecting you more than as much as they are, more than they are. That's the reality of it. And so it's honing in on that skill. And unfortunately, what makes people good at that skill is, what makes people good at dealing with loss? Losing. Because until you actually have experience, so I see like sports, some of these sports nowadays, like they don't they don't keep score on teams anymore, or they don't there is no first place, or there are no winners. There's like honorable mentions. It's like, man, what you're doing is you're setting people up for having to learn how to deal with loss later in life. And I'm glad at some level in sports as a young kid that I had to learn how to deal with loss. Because at least I had some of those tools, but not enough, because I would say that throughout my childhood, like I was played like on fairly successful teams as a kid. I mean, we lost, don't get me wrong, but most of my teams were fairly, like, we had good seasons, and it was never like, man, how do you overcome this 0-8 season in high school football? That didn't happen to me. And of course, on a team sport, especially, I think like individual sports are really important for this, but on a team sport, especially like football for that matter, I got 10 other guys to blame it on. Even if I drop the winning pass, surely I'm going to blame it on myself, but who knows, maybe somebody else didn't do their job, and I can somehow in my head convince myself it wasn't my fault. But let me tell you, man, when I'm getting kneed in the face, like, I have no one else to blame it on but me. And I looked at that camp, everything from what I did in the match to strategically how I set my camp up, things where I may have been arrogant and overlooked things and strategically didn't put the right game plan together and really assessed all that. So, yeah.
Well, I appreciate you, man. Appreciate you doing this. Love your mindset, and I think we can all learn a lot from this today. And yeah, like you said, a lot of people listening to this are real estate salespeople, and take a lot of the stuff that you shared today. And you're right, you can apply it to where you are in your business. And because a lot of people right now are dealing with it, with a lot of no's, a lot of rejection, a lot of people are pulling back. It's it's a little challenging out there for a lot of people right now. So
I'll just say this, man. You look at a sport like baseball. If you can hit a ball 3 out of 10 times, you're probably going to end up in the Hall of Fame. That means you're failing 7 out of 10 times. Like, it's like, and that's the reality of life. Like, man, it's like, that's what life is. And probably one of my favorite, like, I don't like doing cliche movie speeches, but one of my favorite movie speeches that rings so true to life is when Rocky in I think it's Rocky 5, when he's talking to his son, and he says, it's not about how hard you can hit, but it's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward.
Yeah.
And that really is life, man. I had on my podcast, I had this young lady on, Darcy Gechter, the Amazon woman who had kayaked the entire Amazon source to sea. And, she basically used the river as a metaphor for life. She's like, you get to a river, if you're kayaking or if you've ever whitewater rafted or anything, it's like you come up to this rapid and you're like, okay, I got a problem to solve here. So we're going to hit this line. We're going to do this thing, go to the right of the rock. Then we got to make a hard left. And you kind of map out what you're doing. You do the same thing in rock climbing if you're a rock climber. And you figure out how you're going to get up this thing, and then you fail, and then you try again, and you fail, and you try again until you figure this thing out. And it's like, if I went into the rock climbing school and said, oh, and I can climb every wall in the school, then I'm like, I'd get bored with that sport. Yeah. And so this is exactly what happened to Darcy. She's on the Amazon. They have a month of rapids, and then the rest of it is flat water. And they had 3 months of flat water. But prior to that, they had all these rapids that were like life threatening. And she's like, but that's what you live for. And oddly enough, we don't apply this logic to life. A lot of us, it's like, man, you need to invite the problems of life. Those problems, like, they're challenges that you need to solve. And if you don't have the mindset of like, listen, I want some challenges in my life because I can take hits and keep moving forward better than anybody else. Like, I grind. I'm a gritty person. I mean, I'm that way as an athlete. Watch my fights. Like, that's what I do. But it's like, I'm that way in life too. I might complain about crap like, oh, this sucks. But at the end of the day, like, I'm going to keep moving forward, left foot, right foot, left foot, right foot. And I don't care. I'm going to grind through that crap. And so, just like someone that's looking at a river, like, I'm going to appreciate those challenges in life. And I used to have this quote written on my mirror that said, it said, I thank God for all the challenges and the trials and tribulations in my life, because it's those trials and tribulations that make the ordinary man crumble. It's what separates me from the ordinary man. And if you don't have that mentality, then you're just going to crumble like ordinary people.
Amen. Amen, brother. Hey, I was introduced to you by a mutual friend, Tom Murphy, really, really great guy. He always wears the pink shirt, the shirt that says free hugs.
I had it on the other day.
Did you?
I did. I love that shirt. I
have one. I have one too. I don't wear it all the time, but
I have a couple of them. It literally is my favorite shirt. I'll tell you a story about that. I have I'm a pretty nice guy. I smile quite a bit. Like, I'm smiling in this interview, but yeah. I have this look of intensity, call it like RDF, is, resting dick face. And I have this look of intensity all the time. And so I think like until you get me smiling, I don't necessarily look approachable. And so I've worn this free hug shirt, and I was telling Tom the last time that he and I talked. I think when I had him on my podcast, I said, not one time has anybody ever asked me for a hug. And maybe it was the day that I had him on the podcast. I can't remember, the day after I ended up calling him, but I wore it to the store that day to go grocery shopping. And the day that I was in the store, I had 3 people that asked me for a hug. And I love wearing that shirt because that day in the store, when someone actually asked me for a hug, there was this older gentleman whose mother was with him, and she had Alzheimer's or dementia or something like that. And he's like, would you give her a hug? Like, she would really appreciate it. And so I gave this woman a hug, and I'm telling you what, I could just see like the sparkle in her eyes light up, and it made my day. It really did make my day. So I do wear that shirt frequently. I know Tom wears it every single day, but it's awesome. Yeah. People look at me like, I don't know, like, what's wrong with you? So I was traveling the other day through airports. I was recently up in Chicago and came back from Chicago and wore that thing on the way home. And unfortunately, not one person in the airport asked me for a hug, man.
Dude, here's a crazy story with the shirt. I was jogging once, and I'm just jogging, and and a car stops, up the road, and pulls over, and a guy gets out, and I'm running, and some guy's coming towards me. So I'm like, oh man, I don't know what's happening. I swear to God, I was ready to okay, I'm gonna this is crazy. Something, I don't know what. And the guy goes like this. And then it occurred to me I had the shirt on, and it was so wild. It was just like the weirdest thing. Dude, I don't even think I've ever shared that story with Tom. I think I need to reach out to Tom.
But you know, man, when things like that happen, like like you realize something as simple as that. It's like it can be a blessing to you or a blessing to someone else. I have this shirt, and it has what we believe Jesus looks like. I'm gonna say that carefully because I don't think he looks anything like the Renaissance version of Jesus, but and he's deadlifting. And like doing deadlifts, like a weightlifting exercise, and it says, and underneath it says, Jesus, the ultimate deadlifter. And I like wearing that shirt because people look at it and it's kind of funny, but at the same time, man, like sometimes that shirt's a blessing to other people, but sometimes it's a blessing to myself, because I'll tell you, like, if, for example, I'm driving down the road and someone cuts me off, and I decide that I want to get a little angry, and then I got Jesus on my shirt, and they're like, oh, like you're really representing Christ real well right now. Like, thank you so much. It holds me to a different standard. So when you're walking around with a shirt that says like free hugs on it, and and then you start getting angry at people at the store or whatever because they're taking too long to get out of the checkout, whatever your triggers are in life, it's like, people are looking at you and you're looking like, oh man, I got this shirt on today. Like, I can't, I got to live up to this standard.
Love it. Well, how do people listening get in touch with you? I know you got your commentator with one. Tell people the best way to get in touch with you if they want to learn more, or just follow you, or whatever.
Yeah, I got my website, richfranklin.com. I have podcasts that I do called Quite Franklin, and I post it on there, as well as I think I'm on Spotify, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts. And then my socials, I'm verified, so you can just look me up, Rich Franklin. I think I'm the most famous Rich Franklin in the world. I don't think there's any other Rich Franklins more famous than me. My Instagram's Rich Ace Franklin, but yeah, they all are. Now maybe my Instagram's Rich Franklin. I think my Facebook's Rich Ace Franklin, but yeah, if you Google Rich Ace Franklin social media, it all pops up. So, all right. And I think I gave you my handles. You can throw them up there if you want to. Yeah,
absolutely. We'll throw them on the podcast. Well, we want to thank our friends in Clubhouse. Appreciate you guys hanging out. And Rich, awesome. Nice to chop it up with you a little bit. And I always ask, and the final question, like, what, everything we talked about a lot today. Like what if there's one thing you want everybody to walk away with today from listening to this, what would it be?
I think it's going to sound disconnected, but not really. I think if there's one thing I want everybody to take away from this today, is that, like, be aware of the impact that you have on other people, right? Like, your words matter. I'm on here today and we're just having fun interviewing, but somebody like Shantae asks me some questions, and the things that I say could impact the lives of these children, right? I mean, it's like, that could motivate someone like her daughter to end up becoming a professional athlete, or a successful executive, or I don't know, a heart surgeon, whatever, you never know. And it's like, just a simple smile or something like that, like taking the time for people. part of the reason you and I got connected through a dear friend of mine. Tom's an amazing stand-up person. Like any friend of his is a friend of mine. And honestly, I'm just like, anytime I get into a situation like this, I'm just blessed. I truly feel blessed that people in this world actually care to hear the words that come out of my mouth, and that they can make a difference in someone, on like positively impact people. And so we all have this power every single day to do the same thing. Like we have the power, just a simple smile at someone, wearing a shirt that says free hugs. When a guy gets out of his car, like, this guy, maybe he was a blessing to you, maybe you were a blessing to him, maybe you guys were a blessing to each other. But the whole point is, man, is like, we're connected and we can be blessings to people every single day. And like I said, just a simple smile can be the difference between someone thinking suicidal thoughts or not.
Awesome, brother. Appreciate you. And you said you have a fight coming up. Well, you're not fighting, but you are in the league. Tell us about the league. It's one.
Yeah, February 25th. We're doing, it's February 25th. I think it airs on the 24th here in the US. Let me check my calendar on that because I don't want to get this wrong. We air on Prime Video right now. So one fight night on Prime Video. Yeah, it'll air Friday night, prime time Eastern. I think I want to say the start time is 8 o'clock, but don't quote me on that because I don't have it in front of me right now. But it'll be John Lineker versus Fabricio Andrade rematch. And if you didn't see the first one, man, it was a barn burner. I mean, it was a really, really, really good match. So I'm really looking forward to this. And the card, it's a good card stacked top to bottom. So it'll be a fun one.
Amazing, man. Well, good stuff.
And I have the best job in the business, man. I get ringside seats. I get to sit there and call the action.
That's amazing. Good for you, brother. Well, it's nice to meet you, man. Appreciate your time today. And just, thank you. I'm humbled, man.
Awesome. Appreciate it. Hey, real note on the time, by the way. I know that you were spot on with the 45 minutes, but keep in mind, I showed up 10 minutes late. So I technically owed you 10 more minutes.
Oh, so we were at 46 minutes. You're right. I forgot about that. So my bad. I went over.
Yeah.
Thank you, man. Well, thank you for that. I appreciate you again, man. It was a pleasure to hang out with you today.
My pleasure, man. Fun conversation. Appreciated the questions from Shantae as well.